The golden rays spilled across the runway as the plane touched down in Montego Bay, Jamaica, stirring a thrill in the hearts of newlyweds Kareem and Shanice Morgan. This was meant to be the beginning of their forever, their peaceful escape as husband and wife, away from the chaos of life in Kingston. Just 3 weeks earlier, they'd tied the knot in a grand wedding that made headlines. Now it was time to relax, reconnect, and indulge in paradise. But what set this honeymoon apart was the presence of Kareem's father, Luther Morgan, a tall, refined man in his mid-50s with silver-threaded hair and a magnetic air of authority. Luther wasn't the usual father-in-law who'd crash a honeymoon. He had funded everything: the luxurious villa on a private beach, the exclusive resort, yacht charters, even the personal chef. He insisted on coming, branding it as a chance for family bonding, assuring them he'd give them space to enjoy their romantic retreat. Shanice had been unsure from the beginning. She barely knew Luther, having met him only a few times before the wedding. He was a celebrated businessman, the mastermind behind a real estate empire, and a known figure in Jamaica's elite circles. But there was something unnerving about him. Maybe it was the intensity of his gaze that lingered too long, or the way he carried himself, like a man who didn't understand the word no. Still, Kareem had laughed off her hesitation. "Come on, babe," he said with that confident smile. "He just wants to hang out with us. Trust me, it's gonna be great." So she went along with it. Their villa was a dream, contemporary, 2-story, surrounded by palms, and offering a sweeping view of the Caribbean Sea. The air smelled of salt and blossoms. The rhythmic waves provided a soothing soundtrack. It was the kind of setting people fantasized about but rarely experienced. The first few days blurred together in sun-drenched bliss: rum punches, barefoot beach walks, snorkeling in clear waters, and romantic dinners lit by candles. Luther, much to Shanice's surprise, kept his distance. He golfed with resort contacts or read by the pool. When they did dine together, the mood was warm and lively. He often praised Shanice's charm and intellect, causing her to blush, though she chalked it up to courtesy. But by the 4th day something changed. Kareem, always buried in work, began locking himself in the villa's office for calls and meetings, leaving Shanice to her own devices. That's when Luther started showing up more, inviting her to share breakfast, offering to walk the beach, even asking personal questions about her life before Kareem. "Marriage reveals things," he said one morning as they drank coffee on the balcony, gazing at the ocean. "Sometimes it draws people closer. Other times, it uncovers cracks you didn't know existed." Shanice didn't know how to answer. But the truth lingered in her chest, the aching feeling of isolation. Despite the beauty around her, something was off. The perfect vacation wasn't so perfect after all. Under the serene skies and ocean breezes, something troubling, even forbidden, had begun to simmer. And no one, not Kareem, not Shanice, not even Luther, could foresee how quickly their dream escape would unravel. The Morgans looked flawless from the outside. Kareem Morgan, 29, was a rising star in finance. Polished in tailored suits, eloquent, and heir to one of Jamaica's largest real estate dynasties. He'd been raised in privilege, educated abroad, and possessed a natural charisma that pulled people in. On paper he was everything. Shanice, 26, was his contrast. Raised in Portmore by a single mother who juggled 2 jobs, she'd fought her way through life, won a scholarship, earned a degree in communications, and carried herself with quiet resilience. When they met at a charity gala 2 years ago, sparks flew. A whirlwind romance followed. He showered her with lavish gifts, whisked her to upscale events, and always told people she made him a better man. But even before the vows, red flags waved. Kareem had a temper, not violent but sharp enough to cut deep emotionally. He'd stonewall her during arguments, make sly digs in public, and disappear for hours without explanation. Shanice told herself it was the pressure, that he loved her, that every couple had issues. She clung to the vision of what their love could become, not what it actually was. Their wedding had been a spectacle, held at a private Blue Mountains estate, documented by society pages and influencers. But behind the glitz, Shanice felt detached. Even on their wedding night, Kareem got drunk with friends and passed out before they could share an intimate moment. It stung, but she kept it to herself. Montego Bay was supposed to be their fresh start, a chance to revive the connection that once felt electric. But the pattern returned. Kareem couldn't disconnect. His phone never stopped buzzing. Every sunset was interrupted by deals. Every candlelit meal shadowed by negotiations and deadlines. Shanice tried to stay hopeful. She walked the shorelines alone, discovered hidden island coves, sat by the swim-up bar, sipping daiquiris and smiling at strangers just to feel acknowledged. She even made the first move. Intimacy, but Kareem dismissed her with worn-out excuses. "You're being immature," he snapped one night when she tried to open up. "This is real life, Shanice. I'm working to secure our future." But our future was starting to feel like only his. And then there was Luther. He noticed her. He listened, not just heard her but really listened. He asked about her goals, her past, the things Kareem never bothered to learn. He knew how she liked her coffee, noticed her subtle expressions, even asked about the faint scar near her wrist from a childhood bike fall. He was everything Kareem wasn't: steady, thoughtful, quietly intense. One afternoon, while Kareem locked himself in the office again, Shanice ended up on the back deck with Luther. They shared a bottle of wine, watching the sea stretch endlessly before them. Conversation started light but took a turn. "You remind me of my wife," Luther said, voice low. She had the same quiet fire in her. Beautiful. Strong. Shanice looked away, cheeks flushing. "Kareem doesn't speak about her much," she replied. "He doesn't talk about a lot of things," Luther murmured. Silence followed, not awkward but full. A silence thick with energy neither one dared label. Temptation lingered like mist on the air. By the sixth day the rhythm of the trip had changed. Kareem was a ghost, absorbed in meetings and midnight calls. Shanice stopped trying. No more dressing up, no more waiting with wine on the balcony. No more hope he'd snap out of his daze. And in that empty space Luther stepped in. Their walks grew longer. Their talks went deeper. The air between them changed. Small touches, lingering eye contact, unspoken understanding. He noticed everything. The curve of her smile. The sadness in her silence. Then came the moment. The villa's AC broke down. The heat was brutal. Shanice slipped into a white cotton sundress, barefoot, cheeks flushed from the sun. She walked into the kitchen hoping to cool down, only to find Luther already there, shirtless in linen pants, sipping coffee. Their eyes locked. "I didn't know you were in here," she stammered, adjusting her dress. He smiled. "No need. You look at peace." She laughed softly. "More like melting." "You wear it beautifully," he said, voice low. A charged pause. Then he stepped toward her, gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "You deserve to be seen, Shanice." Her heart slammed in her chest. She should have moved, said something. But she didn't. She stood, still and breathless. And then he kissed her, slow, confident, the kind of kiss that stays with you forever. She gasped, pulled away, hand to her lips. I can't," she whispered. Luther nodded, calm but unreadable. "Of course. Forgive me." She fled the kitchen, locked herself in the bathroom, her mind spinning. What had she done? What had just begun? Yet beneath the guilt, something else stirred. Desire. She had been starving for affection, drowning in her role as a forgotten wife. And now, for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. That night, Kareem didn't even notice her distance. Didn't ask where she'd been. His eyes were glued to spreadsheets. Shanice lay in bed beside him, wide awake, replaying the kiss over and over again. A door had opened, and she wasn't sure she wanted to close it. The kiss haunted her, in the best and worst ways. And soon she and Luther fell into a dangerous pattern. No words about what had happened, but their behavior shifted. Touches lingered longer. Glances said more than words. Even passing a glass of wine between them felt loaded. The chance came sooner than they expected. A humid Wednesday night. Kareem stormed out after a brutal call, slamming the villa door behind him. "You're lucky I even brought you here," he yelled. Shanice stood trembling, staring at the door. Luther appeared behind her. "You okay?" he asked gently. Tears pooled in her eyes. "I don't know anymore." He pulled her in, and this time she didn't pull away. She folded into his embrace, her tears soaking into his chest. "I can't keep pretending," she said. "Then don't," he whispered, lifting her chin. Their eyes met. And this time there was no stopping. The kiss was hard, hungry, full of months of loneliness. She clung to him like her life depended on it. They tumbled into the guest room, clothes shed like shame. That hour was wildfire. And when it was done, she lay in his arms, the waves crashing outside like applause. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. They had crossed a line. And from the hallway Kareem knew it too. He had come back early, something gnawing at him. He heard enough to know. His wife. His father. In his bed. The betrayal cut clean. But the bleeding had only just begun. Secrets fester like rot beneath the skin. What started that night didn't stop. It grew. Shanice and Luther continued their affair, hidden in shadows. They told themselves it was fleeting. A mistake. But it became an addiction. The secrecy. The adrenaline. The escape. Every rendezvous was more reckless. On the beach at midnight. In the sauna. Even once in the shower, minutes before Kareem returned. But they weren't invisible. Kareem watched, his wife's nervous laughter, her distant gaze. He checked her phone. Nothing obvious. But the emptiness said enough. And he realized, this wasn't just about sex. Shanice was drifting. Falling. Luther wasn't just her lover. He was her escape. And then, it happened. She missed her period. At first she brushed it off. Travel, stress. But then 2 weeks passed. She took the test in a town pharmacy. Positive. And she knew. This baby wasn't Kareem's. She stared at the stick in disbelief, the weight of it crushing her. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It was a life. When she told Luther, he was silent, pacing. "We leave after the trip," he said, voice urgent. "We tell him. We raise the baby. Together." "Raise the baby?" she echoed, stunned. "Are you hearing yourself?" But part of her imagined it. Freedom. A new beginning. Leaving behind the lies and the pain. Maybe, just maybe, this was fate. What Shanice didn't realize was that Kareem had already found the test, tucked behind travel-size shampoos and unused tampons, buried deep in the bathroom drawer. He didn't confront her. Not yet. But that night, as he stood silently in the hallway shadows, watching her whisper on the balcony to his father, her fingertips resting gently on her stomach, like she was guarding a secret, something in him shifted. His heart didn't just shatter. It calcified. What grew inside Shanice wasn't just a child. It was the spark of a storm that would tear their lives apart. The human heart can only twist so far before it breaks for good. Kareem Morgan had always been a man of discipline, structured, calculating, emotionally detached when necessary. He'd built an empire with spreadsheets and silence, not impulse. But now, under the swaying palms of their luxury hideaway, watching the two people he trusted most exchange secretive glances and veiled touches, that control began to fray. This wasn't simple betrayal. It was the erasure of everything he believed in, his wife, his father, his future. And now a child that wasn't his. He said nothing for days. He wore his smile like armor. Even Shanice believed he was still lost in deadlines and deals. But beneath the surface, Kareem was coming undone. He barely ate. He stopped sleeping. The quiet drinking began, rum by midday, whiskey by nightfall. On the 10th morning he sat by the pool, unmoving, eyes locked on the ocean as if it held answers. In his hand, a photo. Him, Luther, and his late mother beneath a mango tree back in Kingston. That photo once gave him peace. Now it turned his stomach. That night, after Shanice drifted off, exhausted by another day of pretending, Kareem quietly slipped out of the room. He padded down the hallway and stopped at the guest room door. Inside, Luther lay awake. They hadn't exchanged a word in days. Kareem slowly opened the door. Luther sat up. "Something wrong, son?" Kareem stepped in, shutting the door softly behind him. He stood still for a long, loaded pause. Then in a quiet voice he said, "You knew we were falling apart. You watched it happen. You gave me advice, told me to fight for her. All while you were waiting to take my place." Luther's jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." "No." Kareem's voice cracked. "Then explain it. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you stole my wife and got her pregnant." Luther stood, tension in every movement. It wasn't planned. It just happened. That was it. The match struck. Kareem lunged. Fists clenched. A scream of rage erupting from deep in his chest. They collided into the nightstand. A lamp crashed to the ground. Luther shoved him back, but Kareem came harder, punches wild, voice rising like an unleashed storm. "You were supposed to protect me," he roared. "You were my father." What followed wasn't a fight. It was an explosion of years, of abandonment, betrayal, pain, and buried fury. Fists hit flesh. Blood splattered across white walls. Furniture cracked. The room echoed with violence. Shanice shot awake to the chaos. Heart pounding, she raced toward the noise, flung open the guest room door, and froze. Kareem stood panting, knuckles bleeding, tears carving tracks down his cheeks. Luther lay in the corner, bloodied, barely upright, breathing in ragged gasps. Shanice screamed, "Kareem, stop, please." He turned to her, eyes wild, glinting with betrayal and something far darker. "Why?" he whispered. "Why him?" Tears rolled down her face. "I don't know." He staggered back, grabbing the dresser for support. Then, almost to himself, he muttered, "It's over. It's all gone." And just like that he walked out. Down the hall. vanishing into the shadows of the villa. No one slept that night. The silence afterward rang louder than the fight itself. The fantasy was shattered. The honeymoon was dead. Something had fractured, and no one knew how to fix it. But the worst wasn't behind them. Because broken men don't just walk away. They burn. And blood had only just begun to spill. The next morning the villa was silent, eerily so. Sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating the aftermath. Upholstery overturned. Glass on the floor. Drops of blood like punctuation on a love story turned war zone. The blood on the carpet and the crashing of distant waves no longer felt serene. They mocked the silence that had fallen. Kareem didn't return that night. Or the next. Shanice and Luther drifted through the villa like ghosts, suspended in a fog of shame and uncertainty. No words passed between them, only silence too thick to cut through. Luther sat hunched near the window, his bruises deepening into purple shadows, his face blank, drawn, a portrait of regret. Shanice moved aimlessly, pacing the marble floors, her mind racing in circles. Was this truly the end? Her marriage? Her family? The life she had clung to so desperately? And what about the child inside her? Would she now face motherhood alone, caught between betrayal and abandonment? Kareem hadn't reached out. Not a call. Not a text. A part of her feared he was already gone, not just from the island but from everything. That he'd vanished, leaving her behind to sort through the ruin. Just as her thoughts grew darker, the sound of tires on gravel jolted her. A car. Shanice froze, eyes locked on the front door, her heart slamming in her chest. Then came the creak. The door opened slowly. Kareem stepped inside. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes hollow, the light in them extinguished. He didn't say a word. Didn't look at either of them. He walked past them like a ghost, straight to the master bedroom and shut the door behind him, locking it with a click that echoed louder than any scream. Kareem? Shanice called out, voice thin, trembling. No answer. Only the slam of finality. Time dragged. Minutes turned to hours. The villa remained still, too still. They could hear muffled sounds from the other side of the door, but not enough to make sense of. Luther sat motionless, his leg bouncing slightly, jaw clenched. Something was wrong. Kareem wasn't the type to retreat. He acted. He decided. He moved. This hiding? This wasn't him. Shanice couldn't wait any longer. She crossed the room, pressing her palm to the bedroom door. It was ice against her skin. Kareem, she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady, please, talk to me. Still nothing. She tried the knob. Locked. Panic spiked through her. Kareem, she cried, pounding on the door. Please, open the door. No answer. Only silence. Luther appeared behind her, his voice low and tense. We should call someone. We need help. But Shanice was already twisting the knob again, harder this time, until suddenly it gave. The door creaked open. And what she saw shattered her. Kareem was on the floor, motionless. An empty pill bottle rested on the nightstand. His skin was pale, almost gray, and a thin line of blood traced the corner of his mouth. Kareem. Shanice dropped to her knees, hands shaking him, screaming his name. No, 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 please wake up. But his body didn't respond. Luther stood frozen in the doorway. His breath caught in his throat. The man who had once been unshakable, his son, his legacy, was lifeless before him. And though he said nothing, guilt swelled behind his eyes. This was his fault. He knew it. But there was no time for guilt. Only grief. Shanice wept, rocking beside Kareem's body, begging him to open his eyes. But he was gone. The villa, once a luxury haven, had turned into a mausoleum. The lies and the secrets had bled out, marking the walls, soaking into the floors, poisoning the air. When the police arrived, it didn't take long to determine what had happened. There were no signs of violence. No external force. Only a man who had reached his limit and chosen silence forever. The official report said suicide. But to those who lived it, it was a slow, aching collapse of everything he held dear. Shanice stood in the corner of the room as the officers filed out, their voices fading into the background. She was numb. What now? How would she explain this to their child? To herself? She had lost her husband. She had lost her sense of home. And now she was left carrying not just a baby, but the weight of it all. The burden of what she'd done pressed on her like a storm cloud that refused to lift. But what haunted Shanice most was the question she couldn't stop asking herself. Was Kareem always destined to break? Or had she and Luther pushed him off the edge with their betrayal? There was no answer, only silence. One thing was certain. Life as she knew it had splintered into something unrecognizable. The blood had spilled. Now came the reckoning. Kareem's death shattered what little peace remained. The villa, once a picture of tropical serenity, became a monument to grief and shame. Shanice couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Grief gnawed at her insides. But guilt, that swallowed her whole. She knew what they'd done. The affair. The child. The lies. All roads led to that night. And Kareem had paid the price. Luther tried to be her anchor, but the weight of what they shared was too heavy. Their bond was no longer passion, it was punishment. They were both drowning. The police closed the case quickly, suicide. But rumors drifted like smoke. Infidelity. Betrayal. Everyone sensed there was more to the story, even if they couldn't say it aloud. When Shanice returned home, reality hit harder. There were no more palm trees or white sands to distract her. Only silence and the looming truth she carried inside her. Her pregnancy remained hidden. She wore flowy dresses, avoided questions, lied with a smile. Luther kept his distance, slipping deeper into his own isolation. They rarely spoke. The fire that once sparked between them had turned to cold ash. But secrets don't stay buried. Eventually her family found out. The whispers turned into accusations. Her mother's face twisted with disbelief. Her father refused to speak. "You were with his father?" her mother spat. The disgust in her voice felt like knives. There was no forgiveness. Only fracture. Her relationship with her family lay in ruins. When her daughter was born, Shanice should have felt joy. Instead, it was a quiet ache. The baby's cry was sweet, but behind every smile was a shadow. She named her Amara. Grace. A hope for healing even in the wreckage. With nothing left for her in the city, Shanice moved back to Kingston. Back to the roots she once ran from. She needed space to breathe, to try and rebuild a life she could live with. But Luther never followed. No calls. No letters. No goodbye. The man she once believed in had vanished like smoke, leaving her with their child and the consequences he helped create. Now, as Shanice rocked her daughter to sleep, she stared out the window at the Kingston skyline and knew. This was her new beginning. But it came with scars. With ghosts. And with secrets etched into her story forever. They would live within her. Within Amara. A legacy shaped by pain, betrayal, and survival. A life forever changed.